What's up? Welcome in to the latest episode of the Irish Huddle. It's Thursday, October 22nd, 2020. I'm Patrick Engel, joined as always by Lou Somogyi. Notre Dame going on the road for the first time this year, even though it's late October. Normally you'd think this would be about week 7 or 8 and everybody would have put out their midseason All-America team lists. But nope, here we are in Notre Dame's 5th game of the year. And an oddly late start to the season where it's your first road game of the year so late in the year. So, Lou, I ask you, the all-knowing encyclopedia of Notre Dame facts and history, when was the last time Notre Dame played its first road game of the year so late in the calendar year?
Well, Josh, you have to go back to 1934 when it's the first time since 34 that the first 4 games were at home. But back then, the season didn't begin until October. And I think 1940 was the last time actually where you go this deep into the season where it's your first road game. Now, in 2014, Notre Dame had a couple of neutral site games with Purdue at Indianapolis and Syracuse at the Meadowlands, the old Meadowlands, and before they had an actually true on-campus road game in that heartbreaker against Florida State when they were number 2 in the country, ended up losing 31-27. But it's probably comes at a good time, though. Sometimes when there's some criticism after a 12-7 win over an opponent that people thought you should have won by several touchdowns, sometimes it's just good to get away and be on your own there.
Yeah, maybe you'll just feel like, all right, this is actually a season. It's not just us walking out here at home and playing these teams that we feel that we should beat, but for whatever reason, just hasn't all clicked and have been dealing, of course, with the weird off season and just weird prep time for all of it. We're going to dive into the game a little bit later on, but first, we have a very special guest join us to talk all things Notre Dame football and some very enlightening NFL stories that he's been a part of here, and that's Derrick Mayes, the former Notre Dame wide receiver. We will play our conversation with him in just a minute. First, we want to make sure that you are subscribed to the Irish Huddle podcast on Apple or Spotify. If you're listening to this on a platform other than that, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, or hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at PatrickEngel_, that's ENGEL, and you can follow Lou at BGI_Lou Somogyi, SOMOGYI. So, Lou, let's play our conversation with Derrick Mayes, the Notre Dame receiver from 1992 to 1995 and Super Bowl champion with the Green Bay Packers. We are really pleased to welcome former Notre Dame wide receiver and Super Bowl champion Derrick Mayes to the Irish Huddle podcast. Derrick, we really appreciate you joining us today. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Patrick and Lou. I appreciate being here.
So we understand now you're out in LA. Tell us what life has been like post football and what you've gotten to do, if anything, to stay involved with the school and the football team and what your ventures are out there.
Well, my main and number one venture is chasing my son around. He's in the 8th grade out here in middle school in Santa Monica, and that's just been a dream for my wife and I. I am able to participate back with the university as a member of the Monogram Club board. I'm going to my 2nd year there, and had it not been for COVID, we'd probably be out there as we speak for one of the home games for our annual meeting. But life certainly gets in the way, and we're trying to adjust accordingly.
Huh. The anthem of 2020, that's for sure. But in what you have seen and watched on TV and everything, what have you seen from the offense in particular and the passing offense even in that and what you've been able to watch?
Well, what I've been able to gather and understand is that Coach PK is trying to establish the run, and I was able to catch the Florida State game, and I think that was one of their better displays of just what ultimately would be a balanced attack. Running games win championships. Defense wins it all, but you certainly won't find any championship team without a well-established run game. So that's been exciting to see. I think this year is going to have an asterisk on it. I think for everyone, in terms of their development for the team, often being stymied due to COVID, whether it was outbreaks or if it was just simply an augmented schedule, a different schedule, being your opponents or even the timing of the schedule. So this is all going to have a big asterisk at it. So I think you have to throw away any plan that you had in mind prior to COVID and adapt as best you can. But I think fundamentally it all starts with the running game, and I think it's important to establish it in such a uncertain time and space, right? If you can count on it, perhaps if you do have to encounter another day or two where you can't practice and that gets disrupted, you can at least lean on some of those. So I would. That's how I would probably approach a season like this with so much uncertainty. There's going to be a ton of parity that's going to come out of it. I said between injuries and just random athletic activity, is going to completely change, what you anticipated to happen this year for what's really going to happen.
Hey, Derrick, you know a lot about establishing the running game, having worked under Lou Holtz there during that time that you were here from 1992 through 95. But one of the amazing aspects of your career here, you caught 129 passes, and they averaged 19.4 yards. To put that into context, Heisman Trophy winner Tim Brown, he caught 8 more passes, 137, and he averaged 18.2 yards, which was phenomenal. But you were at 19.4. Now, you were never known as a speedster, a guy who would just blaze by somebody like a Rocket Ismail or a Tim Brown, but you were extremely productive while also putting up those numbers. Big criticism of the Notre Dame passing attack, one of them, has been the lack of separation among the receivers. Is that a speed aspect? When you look at it as a receiver, what is the most integral trait necessary for a receiver to get separation from a defender?
Well, Lou, I think this idea of separation and being a burner has been conflated over time, right? I think it's a real misperception that to create separation, you have to be a burner. When I look at the greats who played the game, and just on a professional level, my mind goes straight towards Jerry. It goes towards Mike Irvin. And those guys were able to separate based on being crafty at their skill set, right? At the position. I didn't know that was the stat, by the way. I didn't know that was my average. If I had known that average, I would have led with it and told anybody who wanted to listen when draft was coming around that I averaged 19 yards per catch.
19.4.
That's amazing. No, that's truly amazing. And leave it to you, Lou, to survive to be able to continue to astonish me with your brilliant mind of statistics. We could have really used you and analytics back in my day. You would have been one of my biggest advocates. Seriously, when I think about separation, getting back to that, I think two things came out of that average, that 19.4 average that you're talking about. Number one, with a balanced attack, you can allow for throws downfield. The majority of the passes that I caught were downfield passes. I didn't get into the sort of slot style wide receiver that I became as a professional until I got to the league. Hell, I didn't even know that I was a red zone threat and a third down converter until I got to the league. So when it came to, the passing game, I always looked at myself as a downfield threat, and I didn't care that I wasn't the fastest because, quite frankly, you don't need to be the fastest. What you need is about 2 to 3 feet of separation when the ball's in the air. In fact, I wanted to be next to my defender when the ball was in there because I knew how to separate right when it was time to go catch the ball and change up what I was doing versus being 5 yards apart and that defender able to close in on me when the ball was coming. So, separation is a matter, I think, of timing the ball when it's coming and when you need to be ready to separate. If I'm running a comeback, it doesn't matter whether I'm 4-2 or 4-5. I need to be able to make sure that on my 7th or 8th step that I've got that defender on my hip and that he's either parallel or slightly ahead of me so that I can make an effective comeback for my quarterback to throw the ball outside and to the sideline, and I'm the only one that catches it. So, I think that I probably went a little bit further down the rabbit hole than you wanted me to, but this idea of effective passing game, downfield passing game, and it requiring separation, I don't think that's it. I think if that's the what's being said is why there's people aren't being effective right now at Notre Dame when it comes to passing, I think that means that you need to go back to the drawing board with the wide receivers and teach them how to separate.
So going off that a little bit, and if separation being a thing where it's not all speed or all raw traits that would pop out at like a scouting combine test or something. But drawing on your experience in college or even the pros, what are the things that you found usually kind of take the longest to iron out in a passing offense, particularly between quarterbacks and receivers?
Yeah, I think quarterback receiver timing is important. The relationship between quarterback receivers is important, but again, I think that's when if you're working on timing type of routes, if you're working on a go route, you're working on a man-to-man route that requires timing. It's going to come down to your relationship with your wideouts, knowing when they break, indications that they're going to make before they break, and I think the same goes for that wideout, knowing the tendencies of your quarterback. But I also look at a lot of this zone-style defense that's happening. It's not like, these teams are lighting it up, bump and run. These are zone plays. This is schematic. And so the one common denominator that I find, whether it's a man-zone type of decision that you want to make in trying to bolster your passing attack, is establish a run attack. Come back to that again. It's a real simple fundamental, and especially if you don't have a lot of things in your favor, meaning time to prepare, injury management. Well, shoot, man, make sure you got some runners that can get you 3.5, 4 yards a clip, and you're not going to be unsuccessful. At a minimum, you're going to be sitting at third and short and third and medium, where you don't have to dig too far deep into your playbook and come up with a pass that can get you a first down.
Now, during your time, Derrick, your first 3 years, you had 4 different quarterbacks throw to you. You had Rick Meyer your freshman season, and then both Kevin McDougal and Paul Fela as a sophomore. Then Ron Paulus took over your junior year. And with each of them, you had to develop some type of chemistry. How important was that? And, for example, and you said this is a game changer with GoFed as far as what you can and can't practice. You miss an entire spring. How does this have an impact, perhaps, or does it at all, if any, on that type of chemistry?
I do believe that it can have an impact. I'm not gonna even assume I know what's happening right now. In this current state of COVID and college football. I can only imagine. I can't relate whatsoever. But when I think about the relationships, between myself and Rick, and then Kevin, combination of Paulus and Tommy Krug, my senior year. I think number one, you're already predisposed to have a relationship with your quarterback as a wide receiver, and I think vice versa. So you're going to automatically find commonalities and further solidify your relationship by default. I think if it were a pass-happy offense, I think then it would reflect the need to have that relationship with your quarterback even more so, and probably as a collective group of wideouts and that quarterback. Got to be all reading from the same page, because it's more of an orchestra versus a partnership, one-on-one partnership, right? But again, I think there's enough time for you to be able to, learn the playbook, learn tendencies if you're paying enough attention. It doesn't require that many repetitions. I think what it requires is just an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish in the passing game. And maybe that's, maybe that's what needs to be defined. Are we going to be a quick hit and complementary to the run game, or are we going to be, a 40, 50 time, passing offense? And I think preparation should reflect, which one of those are your goals.
So going off a little bit there too, there's one thing that I guess has been, fans love to look at this, and Notre Dame signed a pretty good freshman receiver class, and by and large haven't seen the field with those guys yet. And I'm sure, even as college football has changed since you've played, there are still similar challenges of being a freshman football player, freshman student athlete at Notre Dame. And I guess go back to your freshman year. What was the hardest thing to pick up on at first and learn at first, and what allowed you to get past that in time?
I think what I had the toughest time adjusting to was the rigors of being a student athlete at Notre Dame on a whole. But in the end, football's football, man. It's the same size ball. Whether it's coming from an All-American or a walk-on, I treat that ball the same. That's a mindset I think that you have whether you're a freshman or a sophomore. I think how you're taking in that first year is a choice. And for me, I think I know I fully immerse myself in the experience, and I look to the leaders as the way to go about it. And the leaders I had in front of me were Jerome Bettis and Lake Dawson and Rick Meyer and Irv Smith. And just naming those four guys, Aaron Taylor, those 4 or 5 guys alone, they approached the game of football with enthusiasm, with a nice swag about them that, that they were prepared and they were ready to compete against whomever. And that was really easy for me to emulate. And so, I was one of the ones who's chomping at the bits, to get on that field. I can't wait till the show starts for me, because when I get my chance, I know I'm gonna make the most of it. But again, that's a mindset. I don't think that's something that you're gonna learn in training camp. I don't think that's something that you're gonna learn. It's either in you or it's not. And that being said, I can think about guys who I knew who probably were much more talented than me coming in, or even more touted than me coming in. Had a hard time adjusting, possibly because of injury. You get a tweak here and there that could set you back, set you in a tailspin, affect so many other parts of your life, and maybe the academic side of it. There's so many variables that are out there. So, I think I think it's a crapshoot. What you're going to get from a freshman, regardless of their recruiting status and what they came in here with. When you come to Notre Dame, everyone's a damn All-American. So get in line, right, with your stats and your accolades. You got to put those in a box and make some new ones.
Yeah, that's a pertinent topic today, Derrick, especially because they signed a 5-star receiver in Jordan Johnson this year, who hasn't really been able to get on the field despite the passing woes that they've had on occasion. And I think one of the things you mentioned there was the student-athlete aspect of it, which Brian Kelly also hinted at that might be, perhaps holding him back a little bit more than maybe the average fan would like. But hey, Derrick, before we go, there is one question I have always wanted to ask, and speaking especially of highly touted players coming in. Prior to your senior year in 1995, Notre Dame signed a young man named Randy Moss at the receiver position. He wasn't admitted and ended up having an incredible career in the NFL and doing very well with the Monday Night Countdown and all. Always wondered, Randy Moss and Derrick Mayes on the same field together at Notre Dame. Well, have you ever thought about that and how Coach Holtz could have adjusted and lined up with that and how it would have worked in 1995?
So, Lou, I dreamt about the idea. Randy was my little brother. I was his host when he came out here to visit. Coach Holtz, I remember the summertime when Coach called me to make sure I reached out to Randy and stayed in touch with him. Once he made his decision to come to Notre Dame, I remember that morning before his visit was over, and he told me and confided me that he and Bobby Howard were going to come to Notre Dame. They were a package deal, and it was in great anticipation. I remember going through spring training, and Coach was just marveling about the idea of what we were going to do together, and I really embraced it. I thought nothing more would be more better to have another guy and doing the same thing. It goes back all the way to my recruiting process. Amani Toomer and I, for a handful of schools, were package deals. For a long time, Amani Toomer and I thought we were going to go to either Notre Dame or Michigan or Stanford together. And ultimately we didn't. But again, you talk about mindset. That was just, I really embraced that idea, that challenge. I never looked at it as, there's only one ball that's going to go around and who's going to split duty. I didn't look at it when Lake and I was blessed enough to play with him. We never looked at that in a selfish manner. So I think mindset's important too, being a highly touted individual, wanting to come in and embrace the competition. I remember my senior year at the Orange Bowl, and the festivities, getting to see Randy. He came, ran up, and gave me a big hug because he was with Florida State by then. And even then, we marveled about how it would have been had we been playing together. We ran each other out here in Los Angeles 2 years ago, and we still have the same conversation every time we run. And you know what it would have been had we been playing together, and that's pretty awesome. He's had a Hall of Fame career, and I couldn't be more proud for him to see what he's been able to do after football and his post-career as a commentator now.
Well, one of the all-time what-if questions in Notre Dame football lore.
Indeed, I agree. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Derrick, we'll end with this one for you. And speaking of NFL stars, tell us about playing with Brett Favre and what that demanded and just what that was like on a daily basis.
Yeah, literally, I got to play with a legend. I got to be with a legend. I got to develop a rapport and a relationship, with a legend. And he exuded it. He lived it. Nothing was, there was nothing produced. That was just him. He was just living an authentic life of himself, version of himself, if you will. And I remember, I go back and I love to tell the story about how he and I invented the back shoulder pass, and how Mike Holmgren frowned upon it. He would get in our tails. He'd call us over from the sideline. What is that? You guys drawing up stuff in the dirt again? I told you about that. And this is a great example. It goes back to the separation. The reason we did that was because of that. I wasn't going to burn up any field, but Brett knew I would catch the ball. So Brett would say, hey, look, I'm going to pull you up. And that's how he would call it. It became a play called Venus, and some people now call it the back shoulder pass, but it was out of just innovation. I wasn't going to run past anybody, but I didn't need to run past anybody. We could run 10 yards, 20 yards, 30 yards downfield, and I knew that he was going to pull me up. And by pulling me up, all I had to do was just stop and catch the ball, and I got a first down. That's legendary status, man, and that describes who he was. We'd be successful, and Mike's just over there looking at us out the side of his eye. That was fun, man, and be a rookie and take all that in and to go and to the pinnacle and win it all with a legend like him and like Big Dog Reggie White, God rest his soul, and Wayne Simmons, God rest his soul. What an unbelievable experience for me. But again, just being a kid wanting to be there is 60% of the challenge. So I encourage anybody who has the opportunity to be in this space, to really own the experience, right? Soak it in like a sponge, because you never know where it's going to bring you. You never know where it's going to take you. And I didn't have to have a plan for any of that other than being ready. Be ready and be available.
And yeah, look where it took you. You guys can claim innovation here for a past that's pretty common today. But yeah, Derrick, thanks again for joining us, and we appreciate all the time and the insight here.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Go Irish.
Okay. Derrick, thank you so much.
Love you, Lou. Thank you so much, man.
Well, if any of you listeners ever wonder about what could have been with Randy Moss at Notre Dame, well, a guy who would have been playing with them does too. I thought that was pretty neat, and Lou, a really interesting question into a kind of a great mystery in Notre Dame football history.
Yeah, we've often thought about there's so many throughout history. What if Knute Rockne hadn't died in the plane crash? How many more years would he have had at Notre Dame? And you can go on and on with a lot of the what ifs. And I think that one from 25 years ago is one of the all-timers.
So he touched on a couple of interesting things that I thought are very applicable to this year, and one of them being like, what is the passing offense? And I think it's been clear with one, just what Notre Dame has tried to do. I mean, forget about the success of it for a minute, but yeah, obviously the success of the running game lends itself to a pretty clear picture of, all right, this is what Notre Dame is going to build itself around. But given that, I think, yeah, what is the passing game? It's something that doesn't have to go out and win you every game, but just can't be the reason you lose any of them. But at the same time, you have to imagine there's going to be a game or two. It might even be this week where you're going to need something or a different source or something from that passing game to move the ball a little bit more when there's just resistance. I mean, they're not going to plow around a Florida State for 350 yards, or even when this not great offensive performance against Louisville still put up 260 taking out sacks. So you're going to need something from them, and I think that's kind of the thing that they're trying to still tinker with. And although, as I wrote this week on blueandgold.com, not exactly a thing where you've got all this time in the world on your hands.
No, it's you're going right into it right away, so you can't dwell too much on last week. But Ian Book 4 years ago or 2 years ago, that was his fourth start against Pittsburgh after he had taken over, and he was just on fire. He was sizzling. He had completed 72.4% of his passes against Stanford, Virginia Tech, Wake Forest. Stanford and Virginia Tech were ranked and really looked like a savior. And then Pat Narduzzi's defense comes in and really – it's the first time he's pressured. They have several sacks on him. They pressure him constantly. Notre Dame's trailing at halftime 7-6, 14-6 in the third quarter. And it's like, okay, what do you do against this type of pressure? They sold out completely on stopping the run. Dexter Williams in that game had 13 carries for 31 yards. And that's the MO of a Narduzzi defense. It's like, we're going to sell out on the run, and we're going to put the corners on an island most of the time. Now, when you have that island features Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool, you can do something with that. And Notre Dame adjusted in the second half. They moved the pocket a little bit more against the man-to-man defense, some more bootlegs, used some of Ian's strengths. And Ian in the second half was 13 of 14 for 158 yards. So he adjusted well. Now, the one incompletion happened to be an interception, so the ball never hit the ground in the second half with Ian. But they adjusted and were able to eke out the 19-14 victory. The question this year is, Pitt, once again, is going to be selling out against the run because that's Notre Dame's strength. And here's Pittsburgh, ranked number one in the country with the run defense at 61.5 yards a game. They're both going to have their successes, but I think the X factor is how does Notre Dame's receiving core handle that man-to-man coverage situation? Is there a Chase Claypool? Is there a Miles Boykin lurking there in this game? And we haven't seen it this year. There hasn't been that right chemistry or whatever you want to call it, rhythm in the passing attack. How committed will Notre Dame remain to the running game if it doesn't experience the early success? I think these are the most intriguing questions, which I'll have up later on our website.
Yeah, it's going to be the same thing from Pitt, like you said, quarters coverage, man defense. I mean, you just go back to Narduzzi's defenses at Michigan State, and you remember guys like Darquise Dennard who'd just be out there on an island pressing guys because he was that good at it. I don't know that Pitt has a clone of him, but they have good DBs, physical DBs who like to do that and can hang one-on-one. I mean, like you pointed out, they're hard to run on at all, and they're going to sell out with that. But it's not like, all right, you can chuck it around and their corners just don't even hold it. If you're doing that and running this kind of defense with bad DBs, that'd just be bad coaching, right? It would just be a thing where you're just not putting players in position to succeed or not playing to get strengths. That's not the case here. But yeah, I think it's not going to be a game maybe like that one was, or the 2012 one was, or just the thing it always seems to be with somebody who plays Pitt when they come in highly ranked, as a thing where it's going to catch them off guard. I mean, I certainly think from going off of what Kelly told us and just how the game played out, you would expect that was kind of a wake up, a jolt, whatever, of We've got to, as Kelly would say, get a sense of urgency. And maybe that's not the most encouraging thing to hear with a veteran team, experienced offense, and I think that was particularly what he was referring to. And guys who've played a lot of football, but that seemed to be the message in practice this week, at least from what Kelly has told us on two separate occasions. And he called that game a learning experience on Saturday, and I asked him about that Monday, and he was asked a little bit of a similar thing on Thursday. And yeah, he was just saying it's got to be sense of urgency. And again, I think it's very fair to wonder why that's a talking point at this point in the year for this particular team. But I think that we'll actually see that. And that's kind of one thing I'm watching for above all, as much as anything else. Even as you look at, all right, can they run the ball? What's the Pitt offense going to do? Whatever. Is it crisp? And that doesn't mean, all right, you got to go up 28-0 at half. But I don't think we'll see a bunch of sluggish, just something that's very self-inflicted, slow, not taking this as urgently, to use his word, as you might expect when you see some big upsets or how some of the Pitt's previous big upsets have played out.
Yeah, the flip side for on Pitt's end is they've lost 3 straight conference games. All of them, well, the first 2 were heartbreakers. And in each of them, they gave up a minimum of 30 points. They lost 30-29 in the final minute to North Carolina State. They lost in overtime to Boston College, 31-30, when Pitt missed an extra point. And last week it was 31-19 with a new quarterback, Joey Yellen, in place of the injured Kenny Pickett. So we talk about sense of urgency with Pitt. It's like, where are their heads? Are they like, oh man, what a nightmare this season has been? Or do they come out themselves even more determined, saying we got to end this? They've never had a 4-game losing streak in Pat Narduzzi's 6 seasons there during the same season. There was one that carried over from one to the next, but you talk about urgency, they have that as well. But it's one of those deals where once you've lost 3 in a row, if you get down early again, boy, then the mind can play some havoc with you.
So as we look at this matchup, let's get into some burning questions here. And first, you alluded to it earlier on. What will Notre Dame be able to do on the ground? And the number I look at with Pitt's defense is 3.25 yards per carry allowed when you take out sacks. That's still really good. What do you think Notre Dame is going to be able to find running the ball, if anything?
Well, they'll have their share of success, but the Pitt will also, when you have 2 units like that Pitt is number 1 against the run, it's the old physics question of what happens when an immovable object meets an irresistible force. Both will have their share of wins there. I'd like to think it can be higher than 3.25, Patrick. Somewhere along the line, maybe there's one that's busted out of there or so. Maybe it's even a zone read by Ian Book or so. No one's demonstrated it really so far this season, but Notre Dame's averaging 261 yards. I'm not looking for that type of average, and sometimes numbers can really be arbitrary. If Notre Dame runs for like 180 yards, but it's at like 4.5 per clip, and that opens up so many other avenues or lanes in the passing game where Ian Book throws for something like 270 yards and you hit on a couple of big plays, preferably for scores, then that 180 figure, you can say, well, we held them 80 yards under their average, but technically you didn't really get the job done because it opened up so many other areas. So I don't like to just put arbitrary numbers on it, but it's more about the overall effectiveness that they can muster against that caliber of defense that opens up both the run and the pass.
If Notre Dame runs for 180 yards and 4.5 a clip, they're winning by at least 2 touchdowns. I'm not sure I'm going to go out and predict them to do that. I think they'll get over 100 somewhat easily. I'm not sure it'll be the most efficient, but yeah, I don't think you see some of these opponent rushing lines against Pitt's defense that are like 30 carries for 65 yards. And yeah, there's a bunch of sacks in there and stuff.
Yeah, and they're second in the nation in sacks. They have 29 through 6 games, so an average of basically 5 a game. So that is going to aid that rushing yard average significantly.
Yeah,
but they are very stout up front.
Yeah, and even then, like I'm whenever I just think of rushing numbers here and overall, I'm thinking without sacks included. Like I've gone on that rant before where that stat needs to go away right now, where they include that in rushing yards. But anyway, yeah, I think they'll be able to do just enough, and they'll get creative enough because I think we've seen a lot of creativity in the run game calls from Tommy Rees. It
doesn't have to be. Yeah, it doesn't have to be 180, Pat. Let's say just 140 or 150. But if you're doing like 4.3 yards a clip, don't have any fumbles, and it opens up so many opportunities with the pass. Let's say then Ian throws for 270 or something. That's a victory on Notre Dame's end, just being able to do both fairly effectively.
So speaking of Book, go into burning question number 2. What can Book and the passing offense do if they're called on to move the ball? And I certainly think we can see a situation where we just talked about the upside or best case scenario of what we had just laid out. I don't think it's crazy to think that Notre Dame could have 3 possessions and it looks like that first quarter against Duke where there's just nothing there, nothing to run, whether that be self-induced or opponent-induced. Certainly the latter is a lot more at play here. You're going to have to do something to move the ball. What will Book and the receivers and that entire passing operation be able to provide?
Well, one of the things, I think there has to be a patience, just like there was 2 years ago, which is what Book said was crucial once they were able to move the pocket a little bit. But when I talk about patience, you look at what quarterbacks have done against Pitt in the last 3 games, which Pitt lost. You're not going to necessarily complete a high percentage of your passes, but you can complete them for a good number of chunk yardage. For example, Miami's Derrick King. He was 16 of 31. I mean, these days, if you can hold him right to that 50% margin, that's really good. But he also had 4 touchdown passes among those 16 completions. Phil Jakovic, some people on the board might remember that name. I'm not sure.
I wonder why.
When Boston College beat them, he was 19 of 35. Again, not a sterling percentage by today's standards. But those 19 completions, 358 yards, almost 20 yards per completion. 3 of them touchdowns, no interceptions. And, North Carolina State's Devin Leary, he was 28 of 44, but also for 336 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. So don't get discouraged by some incompletions here and there. Again, it's like the running game. Pitt will have some wins. Notre Dame will have some wins. The way they play defense, they will have some wins in the passing game and force some quick incompletions, maybe even get some sacks as they do. But there's also opportunity to hit on some big plays. And if Notre Dame can do that, I think that'll spell a huge difference.
Yeah, Pitt's given up 9 30-plus yard completions. So that's almost 2 a game. If you want where that ranks, it's 59th out of 77 teams that have played this year. And maybe part of that is, Pat Narduzzi will lament a lot of breakdowns, and I think there have been some of those just when I've gotten to see a few of their games. But, yeah, you're going to lose some things one-on-one when you see some good receivers when you're asking your DBs to play on an island a lot. And I think we'll see Notre Dame try to exploit that. Brian Kelly has said as much about, we've got to win some one-on-ones out there. That makes you a little nervous considering what we've seen from Notre Dame being able to do that downfield. But I think they'll come out with some idea that we've got to do that. We still can push it down the field and just we got to figure out something here and put guys out there that can win one-on-ones. You certainly think about Braden Lenzy as being someone who can do that. We'll see what his health allows him to do this week. Obviously, the first name that comes to mind there is Kevin Austin. Snap count is going up. You would have to imagine that if he's able to, he'll be out there for as many snaps as possible. So I think that they'll do some things, or whether it be moving the pocket, give a little more time for downfield things to develop, bootlegs, whatnot. I think Book's a good passer out of the pocket and on the move. I think they'll eventually hit enough shots or downfield things, or just get enough of the big plays, like you alluded to, like the past three quarterbacks to have faced him have done, and they'll bail out if needed, or just complement whatever it ends up being that they do on the ground.
Yeah, don't worry about the completion percentage. Maybe it's not 70-75%, which is, kind of a benchmark for many and all. And it's what you complete, make them pay. It's more about yards per attempt. Make them pay downfield for that coverage that they are employing.
So that leads us to burning question number 3. Can the defense get some sacks and turnovers? Those were about the only thing that were absent from the game against Louisville. Turnovers haven't really been there a lot all season. And I think the sacks can be a little misleading in that, Louisville ran 45 plays, and a lot of those throws were real quick. So you weren't going to see 5 sacks in a game or anything like that. But still, you'd like to see more than 4 quarterback pressures. And Pitt has had a bumpy offensive line performance, particularly when running the ball. I mean, they just can't run the ball at all. So I think you'll see a game that'll threaten double-digit tackles for loss. I'm sure Pitt will be in that area too. I mean, they had 15 against Miami. Yeah. And they throw a lot of short passes and things just to kind of offset the lack of a running game. I mean, here's a number for you. Pitt hasn't had a running back clear 53 yards in a conference game this year. Not good. Just have not been able to move the ball. Yeah. But
their second,
you're going to see some sacks. I think they'll get that because they still, for all that, dink and dunk, whatever that they do to try to be an extension of the run game, they take shots and they hit enough of them. Those take a little while to develop. I think Notre Dame will be able to get a couple of sacks on there too.
Yeah, their second leading rusher with 119 yards is their quarterback, Kenny Pickett. And I don't know if he's going to be available this week. He didn't even make the trip to Miami last week because of an ankle injury he sustained a week earlier against Boston College. Pat Narduzzi has been, employing the gamesmanship as far as will he or won't he. He doesn't, want to give away anything on that, and that's understandable. Joey Yellen is not quite as mobile as Kenny Pickett. That was one of his assets, and he needed it because, as you mentioned, the Pitt offensive line, other than their all-ACC center, Jim Morrissey, isn't a strength of the unit, and it shows up especially in the running game. So, sacks, I'm not into that stat as much as I am about affecting the quarterback. I know stats always look pretty and all that, but if you affect the quarterback where he rushes it and it's intercepted, that's more effective than a sack. But turnovers is an area. Notre Dame, you want to see that defense maybe produce a little bit more. Last year, they led the nation in fumble recoveries with 19. No other team had more than 16. The 28 turnovers were the most forced by a Notre Dame team in 17 years. This year, I think it's just at 3 right now. And the one interception by Sean Crawford against Florida State near the goal line, that was, an important one. But I think you want to start seeing some production and some short fields out of it as well. That would, I think, further enhance what the offense might be able to do.
Exactly. I mean, it's like you said, I'm all about quarterback pressures as being an important stat, but like at some point, like you got to get them on the ground, right? You want to put them into 2nd and 20 or 3rd and 25 or whatever, or set yourself up with needing 15 yards to get a field goal, or set yourself up in the red zone and when you start a drive there. And to, I guess, go a little bit on the pure turnover numbers, talk about the 19 fumble recoveries. No one should have expected that to be replicable. Fumble luck is the thing that fluctuates most year to year. Maybe, I mean, they have one this year? Is that right? Or maybe I can't remember. I think it's 2. I mean, it's 2 because Sean Crawford has the only interception of the year. You want to see more just getting the ball out. You know, who cares if it's recovered or not? That's not as – you can't pick up a fumble if you don't force it. I don't know if you know that, Lou. But I mean, the more you know. But anyway, you want to be able to at least get plays that are putting you backwards and really putting an offense in a hole. And maybe that's the one thing you can nitpick that you haven't seen quite as much of. But at the same time, Notre Dame's havoc rate, I talked about this in the last pod, been over 20% each of the first 4 games. I think it'll be 25% or more in this game just because I think they'll get a lot of tackles for loss against the run, and they'll get their hands on enough passes. And like I said, I think they'll get a couple of turnovers. So, and 25% for reference, if that were a thing over an entire season, that'd lead the country in havoc rate. Okay, Lou, favorite segment of the week for you. Bold predictions. I'm going to tell you where I'm going to go. And it's going to go back to one of the burning questions. We talked about the big plays and shots that teams have been able to hit on Pitt's defense. And it's interesting because it's not like they have an untalented secondary. No, I think all 3 levels of their defense are really good and have draft picks on them. But I'm going to focus on that anyway. Notre Dame in this game, put me on the record here, has a 100-yard receiving day from some pass catcher. And that's due in part, so there's a second part of this, to at least 2 catches on throws 20-plus yards downfield, because Book will have at least 4 of them. There you go. I don't know, Lou, if that's – decide and tell me if that's oven mitt level, hot, or even lukewarm, but that's my bold prediction.
Hey, look, 2 weeks ago, Javon McKinley had 5 catches for 107 yards against one of the best cornerbacks in college football, Asante Samuel. So, I don't think that's totally out there. And against we've given you the numbers here with Pitt as far as giving up the big plays during their 3 straight losses, especially via the passing game. So, yeah, I can buy into that. I think anyone who knows me, I'm an extremely conservative person. If I was at the Last Supper, I think I would have ordered like carry out too to go or so. But the spread right now is 10.5, and you hear it all week about Notre Dame's not this, Notre Dame's not all that. This is a game I really looked at as an upset special in the preseason. Everything lines up perfectly for Pitt. They have a tremendous history against Notre Dame. 10 of the last 12 meetings have come down to 1-possession games, including 7 of the last 8. You saw what happened in 2018. And they just have that irritating proclivity to bring out their best against Notre Dame. Consistently, sort of like a Michigan State or Purdue used to and all. It's Notre Dame's first road trip, but Notre Dame the last 3 years under Brian Kelly has really, really responded to these kind of quote-unquote upset special type of games. And I'm looking for Notre Dame to come out strong. They talk about the urgency. And as much as it still lingers there, that upset special is really there. If any team can pull it off, it's Pitt. But I'm going to pick Notre Dame by 2 touchdowns.
So not buying into the Pitt happens in this case. All right, yeah, I can get behind that as well. I mean, yeah, the 10.5 line. I'm sure there were some folks in the Pitt offices and players and everything that saw that and thought, oh, that's they got a little chip on their shoulder. But yeah, I think like we talked about with that sense of urgency, I think there's a real kind of stigma coming into this game where it's just locked in, where this isn't a thing that's kind of trappy or a trap and tripwire like it has been just based on where it sits on the schedule in Notre Dame's season. So 2 touchdowns. Let's put some numbers on it. What's your final score prediction?
Oh, I could see something like 27-10. I could even, go as high as 31-13.
What'll it be?
Oh gosh, if I knew that, Patrick, I
You
wouldn't
have to pick
be working
one of
for a
those.
living. I wouldn't be coming into the office here regularly.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be on a beach far away from all this, but here we are. And
Well, let's go ahead with 27-10.
all right, I'm gonna go right around the same thing. I'm gonna go 24-10. That's the under, but yep, I have them covering that spread just like you do. I think it'll be a late cover and a late touchdown to cover from whoever it is. I'm not going to go all the way and pick who it is, although if you made me, I'd say Kevin Austin. Whoever that receiver gets 100 yards comes up with a big play on that last drive that leads to a touchdown and a Notre Dame cover. So there you have it. Notre Dame at Pitt, Saturday, 3:30, ABC. Irish looking to go 5-0 as that Clemson game inches closer. Pitt, for all of the preseason buzz around them, I was certainly part of that. Looking at a 3-4, staring them down the barrel. But like you said, and like the stigma goes, and then the saying goes, Pitt happens. You never know when Pitt's going to go lose to a bottom feeder ACC team and then turn right around and pick off a top 5. Did you know they were Clemson's last home loss?
Yeah, I mean, they're the ultimate Jekyll and Hyde, and those are many times the scariest opponents because you don't know what's going to necessarily happen. I remember Muhammad Ali saying that his scariest opponents were not the ones who could punch the hardest or had the best moves or anything. It's the ones who just weren't maybe totally all there because you didn't know always what was going to go on in the ring. And they definitely have that ability to play up or down to the level of the competition. So, yeah, it's that danger is always going to lurk with Pitt. But what I like with Notre Dame, Patrick, is, in 2018, it's like, oh, enter Sandman at Virginia Tech. These are the type of games and environments Notre Dame doesn't play well. And then they win by 22. Then they go play a very good Syracuse team that lost in the last minute to national champion Clemson. It's like, okay, this is the perfect setup for a loss. And Notre Dame plays its best game of the year and wins 36-3. In 2017, the week after crushing USC, it's like, okay, let down against North Carolina State, and they play a fantastic game, win 35-14 last year. It's like they don't want to be in that Camping World Bowl against Iowa State, that crap bowl. And
last words.
Iowa State, it's the biggest game of their history. Notre Dame wins by 24. Same with Navy. It's like Navy goes 11-2. It's like perfect time for Navy to catch Notre Dame napping, and Notre Dame wins 52-20. So it's almost like they have those rabbit ears of people are expecting this to happen, and it's like, we'll show them.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't expect, on the other hand, last week and look what happened there. But yes,
sure.
All
the more reason.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It'll be interesting. I think it'll be competitive. I will be there, first time in Heinz Field. And we'll talk to you after the game, probably on Sunday night this week and most weeks going forward with our post-game pods. Until then, take care.